everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about the books that I've read recently. And we're using the term recently very loosely because what I want to do today is catch you up on all of the books that I have read since I went on my hiatus. And that's a lot of books. I actually did consider only talking about the books that I've read since January, since the start of the year. But there were some books that I read before then that I had some very strong opinions on, and I'm an opinionated person, and what good is this channel if I can't share my strong opinions with you guys about books? Like, this is the only outlet I have to do that. So we're going to talk about all of them. It's going to be a long video, but after this I hope to have these videos be a lot shorter because we'll only be doing a couple of months together at a time instead of like 6 or 7 months. So with all that being said, this is going to be a spoiler-free video, so if you haven't read these books, you're safe to stick around and watch. Maybe you'll learn about a book that you haven't read that you might be interested in. Who knows? And I actually took the time to write down one-sentence synopses about these books so I don't ramble on forever trying to describe them to you. So it's definitely going to be like a bare bones synopsis because it's one sentence. So definitely no spoilers in there. But I just wanted to let you know I'm going to be reading them off my phone because ain't nobody got time to memorize that shit. And yeah, okay, I think we're ready to get started, so let's go. So when I last left you, I was doing this thing called book breakdowns, where I would read a book and really analyze it and then talk to you guys about it, and we'd analyze it as like aspiring writers. And I told you that the next book breakdown I was going to do was Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and then I never made it, but I did read it, so that's the first book we're talking about. Now comes the part where I read the synopsis. So, in Children of Blood and Bone, a teen girl embarks on a quest to return magic to her people before a tyrannical king can kill off the magic for good. This was a young adult fantasy set in an African-inspired fantasy world, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. There were a lot of things that I really liked about this book. I thought the world building, especially with it being African inspired, was so cool. Even me, the whitest white person you've ever seen, knows a bit about African culture, and the things that I saw, like, I could picture them so well, and I knew what they were inspired by, and it was really cool to see because there's really not many, if any, books set in like African inspired fantasy worlds. So that was really cool, and I thought that the author did a great job of building up that world and making it feel realistic. I also loved the magic system. I thought it was so interesting and well conceptualized. Like, the author definitely put in a lot of time to make the magic system not only realistic but also unique. Like, it felt like it could exist, but it also felt like nothing that's ever existed in any other book that I've read before. And I also really felt like the pacing and the tension were really good throughout the novel, especially at the end. Just everything amped up towards the climax so well, and you'd think that'd just be kind of a basic thing for a book, but honestly, with some of the books that I've read, like, an ending is hard to get right, apparently, and this author did, so I really enjoyed that as well. But the one thing that I did find hard to forgive in this book was that there was one character's arc that just felt totally rushed. It felt like his arc should have stretched out over multiple books, but instead it all happened, it was all jam-packed into this one book, and this included a romance arc as well for his character. It just appeared out of nowhere, and then his views on certain things shifted so fast I felt like it gave me whiplash. I mean, I could tell what the author was trying to do with this character, but the execution just felt totally off. The next book I read was They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, in which 2 teen boys learn that they are destined to die in the next 24 hours and spend their last day together, adventuring around the city and getting to know each other. This was a young adult soft sci-fi that I rated 5 out of 5 stars. I very sincerely loved everything about this book. I especially loved the world building because the whole concept is that there's this app where these people call you and they know that you're going to die in the next 24 hours, and they let you know, but they can't tell you how you're going to die or when you're going to die. It's just sometime in the next 24 hours. And the way the world was built around this the concept of this app existing was very interesting because, for example, in movies, getting the call, as it's called, sort of becomes the dun 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 moment of like dread in a movie. And celebrities, when they get the call, newspapers scramble to get the last interview with them. And it was just so interesting, and the author did such a good job of making it feel realistic how this thing would incorporate into the daily lives of people. But I also loved all of the characters. They were fun to get to know, and it was impressive that the author was able to make me grow to care about these characters that I only knew basically for like one day. You know, it takes place over one 24-hour period. And I got to know these characters and care about them so much in just that short amount of time. Also, there's a romance arc involved in this book. And I really liked the fact that it could have easily felt like insta-love. And in some ways it was, because obviously it takes place over 24 hours. But it also felt very genuine and real and realistic for the situation. You know, like, things go fast when you know you're gonna die in 24 hours, you know? So I really liked that it worked the way it did, and it worked so well. Then after that, I read The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, in which a human girl, her twin sister, and her half-fairy half-sister are kidnapped and brought to the land of fairy, where they must fight to survive vicious bullying and corrupt politics. This was a young adult political fantasy, and I ended up rating it 4 out of 5 stars, though now I'm kind of leaning towards 3.5 out of 5 stars, but either way, it's somewhere in that range. It was just a very interesting book, and something that I'm learning about myself and my taste in books is that political fantasies and political science fictions aren't my favorite genre of fiction. To me personally, the politics really feel like they drag down the story and make things go slow because you have to learn so much about the politics, and I don't know, I'm just not a political person really anyway. I really love it in contemporary novels like The Hate You Give, for example. Like, current modern politics really fascinate me when they're in fiction, but this fictionalized fantasy politics just not entirely my thing, so that did take away from my enjoyment of this book a little bit. Another thing that really took away from my enjoyment was there was kind of a romance, not really, but I didn't like the romantic interest at all. It made me uncomfortable that he was a romantic interest because he's one of the people who viciously bullies the main character and her sisters. And I don't know, I'm one of those people who loves a redemption arc. So I'm hoping that something comes around in the future that makes me like this guy, but for right now I'm like, no, makes me a little uncomfortable that he's the romantic interest. But things that I did like were, I loved the main character. She was just fun to follow. I found her very interesting. Not the most interesting main character I've ever read, but she was definitely fun to follow. And I also really, really liked that the author didn't shy away from delving into darker themes like the bullying and the corrupt politics and stuff. Like, that, I feel like if you're gonna do it, go all in, and she went all in. Then after that, I read Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli, which is the sequel to Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, where Simon's friend Leah is now revealed to be bisexual and falls in love with someone she probably shouldn't fall in love with, risking the stability of their entire friend group as their senior year comes to an end. This was a young adult contemporary LGBTQ romance that I gave 2.5 out of 5 stars to. Yikes. I really, 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 really wanted to love this book because I loved Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda so much. Like, words cannot describe how much I loved that book. But this one just fell flat for me in a lot of ways. But I'll start really quickly by saying the couple of things that I did enjoy. There were some really great jokes that just had me laughing out loud. Like, because at the end of the day, Becky Albertalli's a great author, and her best points are romantic moments and humor. And those were the things that hit in this book even when other things did not hit. I also felt like the overall plot, the overall concept of this novel was really great. The idea of somebody falling in love with somebody they shouldn't and how it might tear apart their friend group. Like, I really liked that. But this leads into the problem I had, which is that I just don't think this story should have been told with these characters. I very sincerely don't think that Becky Albertalli ever pictured Leah or her romantic interest in this book to be anything other than straight. I just don't think so. So the fact that she turned them into people who are in the LGBT community, it just didn't feel realistic. It didn't feel natural or genuine. And because of this, it made all of the characters, because she was shaping and molding these characters into something that would fit into the story, it made them feel slightly off from their counterparts in the Simon Versus book. They just didn't feel the same, and that was disappointing because the whole reason I would want to read a sequel with these characters is for them to feel like the same characters, but they didn't, so. And like, for real, I could not stand Leah. The main character, I could not stand her. And she wasn't dislikable in that way, you know, where sometimes it's like, oh, well, if a male character did all of these things, he would be adored, but because a female, no, that's not the case. She was just a horrible person. She was so shitty to her mom, who was just trying her best. And I know that teenagers don't get along with their moms, you know, every teenage girl has a little bit of a rocky relationship with her mom, but this character just took it way overboard and was just never really nice to her mom, ever. She also just said a lot of shitty things to people and never apologized for it. There was never any redemption for the things she said, and that just made her even more dislikable to me, because I can get behind a character making mistakes and saying shitty things to people as long as in the end they say, I'm sorry, but she never did. She was just a bad person. Next, I read A Map for Wrecked Girls by Jessica Taylor, in which two sisters who have always been close have a mysterious falling out and are forced to confront their issues when they are shipwrecked together on a desert island. This was a young adult contemporary novel, which I DNF'd. And there's two reasons why I DNF books. Either I DNF them because they're just bad, or I DNF them because it's just not my personal taste. This was the latter. This just wasn't my personal taste. There was nothing bad about it. I thought the characters were fine, the writing was fine, the plot was fine. It just wasn't my personal taste. So because of that, I didn't give it a rating, because I didn't feel like there was anything wrong with it, but I also didn't enjoy it, so I just didn't know how to rate it. But the reason it wasn't my personal taste was just the fact that I wanted the story to be solely about the two sisters, but instead there was a romantic arc added in. It wasn't just them shipwrecked alone on the island. There was a boy with them, and he became like a romantic interest to one of the girls, and I just didn't like that. I wanted the book to be completely about the girls. I didn't feel like he was necessary. If he felt necessary to the story, then I probably would have been fine with it, but it felt like he was taking away from the story, and he was adding drama that didn't need to be there. Like, the story could have held strong if it was just these two girls figuring out their issues on this island together, but that wasn't the case. So I don't know, I just wasn't getting into it, but I definitely know that other people could like it and do like it. I mean, it was recommended to me by my friend Lexi, so check it out if you want to. Just for me, that one thing kind of put me off to the point where I just didn't want to finish the book. Next, I read Geekerella by Ashley Poston, which is a fandom-centric retelling of Cinderella, in which an actor playing the lead role in a film adaptation of a famous sci-fi TV show unknowingly falls in love with a critical blogger of the show and film over text message. Did that make any sense? I had such a hard time writing that description in particular. But anyway, it was a young adult contemporary romance that I rated 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought it was just a really cute retelling. I love Cinderella stories. I'm a sucker for them. And I loved the fact that fandom was incorporated into this book, because I'm such a huge geek. I love Star Trek, Star Wars, Sherlock, Doctor Who, Marvel movies, you know, anything that you can be a geek over, I'm a geek over. I love it all. And so seeing that in a Cinderella story, it made my little geeky heart flutter. I also really liked the fact that even though it was a story that I'm very familiar with, obviously, because Cinderella, everybody knows Cinderella, it didn't feel stale. It hit all of the important beats that you have to hit when you're writing a Cinderella story, but it also took a couple of twists and turns that I wasn't expecting that made it, you know, enjoyable to read and not super predictable. One thing I do have to say is that the ending just felt like it stretched on for a little too long. Like, it felt like there was a very clear happily ever after moment, and then the book just kind of kept going a little bit after that, and I didn't think it needed to. And I made a video last week about that. So yeah, but that was the only thing that really bothered me, and that's the only reason why I didn't rate it 5 out of 5 stars really. But yeah, otherwise it was a cute book. I liked it. Then I read Scythe by Neil Shusterman, where 2 teens are chosen to apprentice under a scythe and learn the art of killing in a world where accidental death has been completely eradicated. This was a young adult hard sci-fi novel, and I rated it 3.5 out of 5 stars. This was a book that was super hyped that I didn't really feel was worth the hype. I know many people who would disagree with me, but that's just my opinion. I mean, a couple of great things that I can say about this book is that, first of all, the world building was phenomenal. The author was very good at making this world feel full and rich, and he made it all feel realistic. Like, this is where we could be in however many hundreds of thousands of years or whatever, probably not thousands, but hundreds of years we could end up here. So it felt very realistic, and I really liked that. But politics were also a big part, and like I said, politicals, sci-fis, and fantasies not my favorite thing, so I felt the politics kind of dragged the pacing and tension down a little in this book. I also found that I cared more about the supporting characters than I cared about the main characters. Actually, I didn't give 2 shits about the main characters. They could have died and I literally wouldn't have shed a single tear, whereas the secondary characters, I grew so attached to them. And that was just weird to me. I was like, why do I care more about these secondary characters than the people whose point of view I'm getting the story from? After that, I read Renegades by Marissa Meyer, in which a member of a villain gang joins a league of superheroes in order to infiltrate their headquarters, obtain secret information, and take them down from the inside. This was a young adult fantasy slash sci-fi. It's kind of hard with superhero stuff to know if it's sci-fi or fantasy, so I just kind of it's straddling that line, but either way, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I love this book. I really love the characters, not only the main characters, which I did. I love them and I cared very deeply about them, but I also really love the secondary characters on both sides, the heroes and the villains. I grew very attached to all of them. It was very clear that they were all, you know, a family on both sides, and I just really loved that. I also really enjoyed the world building of this world imagined after superheroes have kind of taken over almost. Like, they run the government, they run everything, and people rely on these superheroes to keep them safe and help them, and if there's not a superhero around, they're like, well, fuck us, I guess. Like, they just don't know how to take care of themselves, and I thought that was so interesting. My only complaint, and this is so minor and petty, but there's 2 points of view in the book, one girl and one boy, and I really wanted more of the boy's point of view, because, I mean, yes, the girl was the one who was pushing the plot forward most of the time. She was the one making the decisions and taking action that was moving the plot forward, but I wanted to see the boy's reaction so bad to certain things, and sometimes we just didn't get it. We didn't get to see his reaction to certain things that she did, and I wanted it, damn it. I wanted it so bad. And then immediately after reading Renegades, I read Arch Enemies by Marissa Meyer, which was the sequel to Renegades, but I can't really give you a synopsis of that one because it would give away too much for book 1. All you really need to know is that, again, this was a young adult fantasy slash sci-fi novel, and this one I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars. I still really loved it. Most of the great things from the first book carried over into this book, but I will say it did have a little bit of second book syndrome, where you could tell it was kind of the connector between book 1 and book 3. It didn't really stand on its own as well as I wish it had. But it was a weird conundrum for me because even though you could tell that, like, there was only so many plot things that the author had planned for this book, and those plot things weren't enough to make it a full book, so she really stuffed a lot of fluffy scenes and filler scenes in. Even though that was the case, I still really enjoyed it because I really loved all of those fluffy scenes and filler scenes, but fair warning, you know, if you're not somebody who would enjoy watching a bunch of cute fluffy scenes between two people who are falling for each other, you may not like this book as much as I did, but I enjoyed it still. And I felt that the plot that did happen was really important and really exciting, but I do think maybe she could have gotten away with doing a duology and splitting some of this action in between those two books, but you know, it is what it is. After that, I read Dreamer by Jamel Vinson, in which a teen girl with dream-related superpowers has to fight off demons and her clone during her freshman year at college. And this book was a new adult science fiction / fantasy book. Again, it kind of straddled that line. It was also self-published and an ARC that I got in exchange for an honest review for the author. And it was also a book that I did not finish. I DNF'd it. This was a case, though, of me DNFing it because the quality was very poor, and I got to the halfway point and I decided, you know what, I know it's not going to get any better, so I just decided not to put myself through it anymore, I guess. So I ended up giving it 1 out of 5 stars because in this case it wasn't a matter of personal opinion. It was factual. There were technical things wrong with this book that I just couldn't get past. I have a policy where I rate self-published books the same way I would rate a traditionally published novel. And if a traditionally published novel was published with this many problems, I would be very unhappy and I would give it 1 star, and so that's what I did here. Mainly the biggest problem in this book was the structure. Just everything felt out of order. It was clear that he doesn't have a clear concept of how novel structure works, and so things were all over the place. We were jumping around from scene to scene. There was no logical, flow of ideas. And so it made it very hard to follow. The synopsis that I give you was like the barest bare minimum of what I could glean from the first 50% of this book. I really didn't know what I was reading most of the time. I was very, very confused. The world building was poorly done because the author didn't seem to know what information was important for the reader to know when. We were getting information that had no pertinence at that moment, and I was trying to retain that, but it was hard because it was unimportant at the moment. And then we were also not getting information that would have really helped to make things clearer about the story. The dialogue was also stiff and unnatural, and the transitions between scenes, or even just between moments within a scene, were very choppy and also unnatural. Like, she'd be leaving class 1 second and then dropping down onto her bed the next second. I'm like, when did we get to your room? Or suddenly she'd be answering a phone and I'd be like, was it ringing? He didn't mention that. So just certain things like that were missing and very choppy. So overall, I think the biggest problem was that I know that he skipped out on a developmental edit. And I think that was to the detriment of his book, and I told him so. I gave him my honest opinions. He decided to go through with publishing anyway, which I respect his choice. I would much rather him do that and, one way or the other feel how he feels than him do something because I suggested it and then it to not work out and then him to blame me for it not working out. Like, I'd rather him just make his own decisions and do what he's gonna do. But I did give him my personal opinion. But I do want to say, I don't think he is a bad writer necessarily. I just think he's a new writer, and he shouldn't have published this book now. I think he should have taken more time to learn how to write, hone his craft. He's only a sophomore in college, I think, so I just think he's a new writer. I think he has really great ideas that sound very interesting. He just doesn't know how to get them onto the paper in the best way yet, but I'm excited to see what he writes in the future as he learns more and more about the craft of writing. Next, I read Brightly Burning by Alexa Dunn, which was a sci-fi retelling of Jane Eyre, where a teen girl obtains a job as a governess for a mysterious spaceship called the Rochester and finds herself falling for the secretive captain while unraveling the mysteries surrounding the ship and its crew. This was a young adult hard sci-fi / romance. It was a little bit of both, and I ended up giving it 3.5 out of 5 stars. The things that I thought were really good about it were, as a retelling, again, it hit all of those major points that you want to hit in a Jane Eyre retelling. I also really love the romance, and if anything, I just wish there was more of the romance, because one thing Alexa really shines at is writing romance. Like, these cute, fluffy scenes making me care about these characters and their relationship. It worked for me. It worked really good. But there were a couple of things that I didn't like. For example, towards the end, she kind of takes a turn from following the plot of the original Jane Eyre story, and I don't know if I really liked her twist on it. I don't know if I really liked her take. It just felt unnecessary, and I feel like she could have taken out that surprise twist or whatever, and instead she could have put in more romance. I don't know, maybe this is just me selfishly wanting more romance and trying to find places like, take this out so I can get more romance in there. I don't know. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, you know, not liking something that she added to the original story, something I don't like that she kept from the original story is like the actual ending, like how the story ends. I don't know, I just didn't like it. It just sagged for me. Actually, the beginning and the end kind of sagged. The whole part where the main character was actually on the Rochester and interacting with the crew and kind of unraveling the mystery, I really loved that whole chunk. The beginning and the end, even though they were like book accurate to the Jane Eyre story, I didn't like them. I wanted them gone. I just wanted that part where she was on the Rochester. But, you know, beggars can't be choosers. And honestly, I don't know if the things I liked or didn't like, if they were influenced by the fact that I do know the Jane Eyre story. Like, if I had just gone into this book blind, would I have enjoyed the beginning and ending more? Would I have cared more about those parts as opposed to just that middle section? I don't know. Would I have had such a problem with that twist that she added? I don't know. So it's hard to know what parts were influenced by the fact that I know the original story and have read it and enjoy the original story, but also had some problems with the original story, you know? So it's hard to know what was influenced and what wasn't. After that, I read Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia, I think is how you say it. In which a teen girl who is secretly the author of a famous webcomic meets and falls in love with a boy who is famous for writing fanfiction of her comic, but feels like she has to keep her true identity as the author a secret from him. This was a young adult contemporary romance, which I rated 3 out of 5 stars. And I actually am kind of disappointed in the fact that I didn't end up liking this book as much as I originally thought I was going to, because for the first big chunk of the book, I really enjoyed myself. I really liked learning about the characters. The comic itself was cool. There were like little comic strips and segments from the boys' fanfiction that were included, and I thought that was really cool. I liked all of the character dynamics and relationships. I also really thought the pacing and tension were really great for most of the story. But the ending just kind of completely ruined the story for me, which is unfortunate. Really, the big problem with the ending was just that it felt very melodramatic and it drug on for far too long. And I can't really say much more than that without spoiling it, but yeah, the melodrama was too much for me to handle. So yeah, the ending just kind of ruined it for me, but the first half of the book was good, so I don't know, take that how you will. Then after that, I read What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera, in which two boys have a chance encounter at a New York post office and fight to make their blossoming relationship work, even when it feels like the universe is pulling them apart. This was a young adult contemporary LGBTQ romance novel that I gave 4.5 out of 5 stars to. And oh my god, did I love this book? Yes, I did. I loved it very much. It was very good. First of all, Adam Silvera and Becky Albertalli equal dream team. Like, their writing styles work so good together, and you could tell which author wrote which character, and it was just so perfectly done. Becky Albertalli got kind of the more lighthearted, quirky, cute character, and Adam got more of the serious, moody kind of character, and it just worked. It just worked. The romance was absolutely perfect. There were so many swoon-worthy moments where I was just like, oh, it's so cute. And there were also some moments where just I had that secondary embarrassment for the characters in a good way, you know, like that meant I was very invested in the characters and I didn't want them to embarrass themselves. So it was just a fun, cute rom-com type of novel that I really liked. Also, just as a whole, like the tone of the book of things going so right and then so wrong, it was totally these two authors, you know, Becky is so right and Adam is so wrong, and it just worked. I don't know how else to describe it. Also, I know I haven't really been talking about the fact that some of these books I actually listen to on audiobook. I just don't feel like it's really a pertinent thing to mention, except for right here, because I listened to the audiobook of this book and the voice actors were perfect for the characters. I'm not joking, like perfect casting does exist and it happened in this book. The only complaint, the only qualm I had about this book, and you can probably see that this is becoming a pattern, is the ending. The ending. Again, there was kind of this perfect ending moment, kind of like in Geekerella, there was like a perfect ending moment, but then the book just went on a little bit too long after that. And so it kind of lessened the emotional impact of what I feel would have been the perfect ending for this book. So I don't know. But again, I made a video about like epilogues and endings going on for too long last week, so if you want to hear more of my opinions on that, go check out that video. I'll link it in the card. Right up there. That's the right side, right? I think it is. And then, finally, I read, the last book that I've read is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which is a story told in interview format that follows the rise and fall of a famous rock band from the mid-60s through the late 70s. This was an adult historical fiction novel that I gave 5 out of 5 stars to, because holy shit, was this a good book. Again, it feels pertinent to add that I listened to this one as an audiobook because, again, the casting was so good. It was a full cast, so every different character had a different voice actor, and it made the story feel so full. It felt like I was really listening to these interviews of these actual people, and it just made me that much more invested in the story. And honestly, with how hyped this book was, I honestly thought that I wasn't gonna love it as much as I did because, you know, Children of Blood and Bone and Scythe and like The Cruel Prince, all of these books were hyped and I liked them, but I didn't love them as much as other people did, so I thought it was gonna be that kind of a situation again. But no, I actually absolutely loved it. I was hooked. I will say part of the reason I loved it so much is because as a reader and as a writer, dialogue is my favorite thing in the world. So a story told completely through dialogue I felt was fascinating. The fact that the author was able to get character descriptions and imagery into the book even when it was only told through dialogue, I thought that was majestic and beautiful. Like, I don't know if I would have been that good because I already struggle with imagery and stuff, so like trying to get it into my dialogue, who knows. But this author did it. I thought she did so well. However, though, if you're not a fan of dialogue or you're not a fan of stories told in like interview format and nothing else, you may not like it quite as much as I did. So just go into it knowing that. Also, I would say go into it knowing that the first third of the book feels a little slow because you just don't know where the story is going yet. You know, you're still trying to figure out who all the characters are, especially if you're listening to the audiobook. You're like, who is this person again? Who are they? What are they doing? But once you get a handle on who the cast of characters is and why you should care about them, and you kind of start to see where the plot's headed, you get sucked in, or at least that's what happened to me. So at least give it a little bit past the first third, you know, just get used to who the characters are, kind of get into the flow of how the story is being told and where it's going, and then I promise you the payoff is totally worth it. Whew. Okay, so yeah, those are all the books that I have read since I last left you. Again, when I do this in the future, it's going to be far less books because I'm going to keep up with it now. But yeah, those are the books I read and those are my thoughts on them. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a beautiful day. I'll see you next time. Bye!